Hey there, welcome to the program. Canada's allies are pushing to create a safe zone in Kabul to try and get more people out of Afghanistan. There are reports of a rocket attack outside of the Kabul airport this morning and a U.S. strike targeting suicide bombers. As we've mentioned, a suicide bombing there killed nearly 200 people last week. Canada's own mission to airlift Afghans and Canadians to safety ended on Thursday, leaving behind thousands of people who were hoping to come to this country. Marc Garneau is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he joins us this morning. Nice to see you, Minister.
Nice to see you, Rosemary.
You've told people in Afghanistan not to lose hope. Given what is unfolding right now in terms of the violence and the threat and the fact that we have no presence on the ground, why should they have any confidence the government will be able to help them?
Because we're working through various channels, along with many other countries, to speak to the Taliban and to get them to agree to a very fundamental demand, which is that all Afghans who wish to leave the country should be able to do so. That's the first thing. And if that is going to happen and safe passage is arranged, then that will certainly make it possible for many to leave. The second thing is that we are in contact with the Canadians and the permanent residents that are there. We have told them that we will maintain that strong communication with them, and we will be looking at all avenues to get them out of the country. Yep. And the negotiations will be a part of that with the Taliban, and also separate negotiations to reopen the airport to commercial operations.
If you are in contact with the people left behind, you must have an idea of how many have been left behind at this stage.
We're getting close to knowing those numbers, but and certainly those that have contacted us and that we are aware of, we are in contact with them. But when people go to another country, we encourage them to register with Global Affairs Canada or with the local embassy, but they're not required to do so. More and more in the past week have been contacting us.
But we're talking about thousands of people, are we not, Minister?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Okay. Canada, as you said, working with allies to talk to the Taliban. Is there anything in particular that you can say to them as in terms of leverage, whether that be foreign aid? I don't know what the other options would be. And is Canada directly speaking to the Taliban at this stage?
Canada is not directly speaking to the Taliban, but we are doing so through our partners. The United States is talking directly to them. France is talking directly to them. We have somebody at the Political Commission in Doha in Qatar, which is an entry door. The G7 is beginning to talk to them. The UN will be talking to them. And the number one point, as I said, is our insistence on the fact that if we're going to in any way be able to assist the people of Afghanistan, we need to have an agreement by the Taliban to allow safe passage of those Afghans who want to leave the country to be able to leave the country, and preferably not only through land borders, but also through Kabul airport. So those are the things that are on the table. What leverage do we have? It's primarily economic. Last week, for example, Canada announced that we would be providing $50 million in humanitarian aid. Mm-hmm. But you will also know that we made the engagement last November through Minister Gould to provide $270 million over 3 years in development aid. There's all sorts of leverage with respect to the Taliban, who are now confronting the fact that they're in charge and they're going to have to make the country work, and that for the past 20 years, about 70% of the money in Afghanistan came from outside because of international involvement.
The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan this morning said that the Taliban has said privately they will allow for safe passage of American and Afghan allies after August 31st. Have you had similar reassurances even through the Americans?
We've been talking with the Americans, and I have a meeting tomorrow with the G7, which the Americans have asked to organize, and we'll be talking precisely about safe passage and a number of other issues.
The Conservatives and the NDP, as you know, and this is really a campaign question, said that they raised this issue months ago. Certainly, we all know that everyone was scrambling at the end to get their citizens and others out. But surely we must also recognize, Minister, that things could have been done faster, telling people to forget the paperwork. I'm not even clear still why the embassy was closed so quickly. We could have had more people on the ground. Are these some of the regrets or errors that you would admit have been made?
So we accept the criticism that has come, but let me put a little bit of context here. And of course, we're focused on the future now. We did get 3,700 people out, and the planes were full for each one of those flights going out of the country. There were 13 countries that were part of that air bridge, all trying to get people out. Yes, we accept criticism that we should have been able to start this early. But of course, none of those 13 countries, including Canada, were able to anticipate the speed with which the Taliban, even the Taliban, I think, were surprised at how quickly they took over the country and how quickly the Afghan army essentially folded. So with respect to the embassy, I have a duty and obligation to listen to my ambassadors when they tell me that it is no longer safe for Canadian personnel to be there and locally engaged staff. And so I followed up with that, and therefore we were able to, and it was essential that we evacuate those people.
The Conservatives and Aaron O'Toole specifically have been calling for very specific things for the government, yes, to work with Afghanistan's neighbors, to try and establish humanitarian corridors, to provide material support to those resisting Taliban occupation. Are any of those things on the table?
Yes, they're all on the table, and they've been on the table for quite some time. I'll be speaking to my foreign minister counterparts in the neighboring countries this week, always with the aim of facilitating exit, should some people exit via neighboring countries. And of course, our embassies and our consulates in those neighboring countries are primed to help them to get them back to Canada.
So just so I'm clear, though, the issue of material support is also on the table. That would be things that people can do to protect themselves from the Taliban?
No, not that specific one. That has not been brought up. At this point, we're focused on talking to the neighboring countries to facilitate the entry of those who choose to go overland to get to an embassy or consulate in a neighboring country. So those discussions are underway with foreign ministers of those countries. What
would you say to the people who have been left behind, and to the people watching who have friends and family members and others who are stuck there? They hear you saying that you're working on it, but they're obviously worried given the increase in violence. What would you say to them, Minister?
Not to give up hope and to sit still, because we're in a very important transition right now from phase one, which was the end of the air bridge, to the point where the discussions are now beginning to happen with the Taliban. The Taliban is not a sort of highly centralized top-down organization. So it's going to take a little while to get through to the leadership, the effective leaders of the country, so that we can put our demands in front of them. That will take a little bit of time, but that process is underway now, and it's a very important one. And again, if we can negotiate safe passage, that will make a very big difference. But we'll have to see how that works out in the coming days. But I can tell you that our partners, our international partners, our regional partners, we're all working on that.
Minister Garneau, thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
Party leaders are, as I've said, expressing concern about what's unfolding in Afghanistan, and it has become an issue on the campaign trail. Conservative Michael Barrett is back with us again, and New Democrat Heather McPherson here to discuss what they would like to see happen to help those left behind in Afghanistan. Michael Barrett, I'll start with you. Minister Garneau there accepting criticism of the government for acting too slowly, but says that he is going to speak to G7 leaders, foreign leaders tomorrow, and other allies to try and find ways to get people out. Is that the best approach for Canada right now, given that we cannot use the air bridge any further?
Yeah, as our leader Aaron O'Toole has said, we need to work with our allies. We need to work with neighbors of Afghanistan. We need to find safe passage, humanitarian and refugee corridors for people to travel through. It's important to note, though, that while we have world leaders like from France and the UK putting forward concrete proposals for discussion at the UN, at the G7, we have a prime minister and foreign minister who are on the campaign trail in an election that they triggered. So leadership is lacking on this, and that's why it's so important that we've said what a Conservative government would do. And well, it's good to hear from Mr. Garneau that they agree with some of those steps. We need to hear out loud what the government's plans are well in advance and not after or during.
Can I ask a specific question about one of the suggestions that Mr. O'Toole made, and I put it there to the minister, about material that could be given to Afghans who are trying to resist the Taliban? Does that mean weapons, or what are we actually talking about there?
Well, we'd have to see what it is that's needed at the time. You know, there's a terrorist organization who's occupying this country. And so they're going to deprive the citizens of Afghanistan of all kinds of things. And so we'll make sure that they have what they need. And it will depend very much on their requests and on what our partners are prepared to, our partnering countries are prepared to do as well. So we'll see what the needs are, but we'll have to have those discussions for sure.
Heather McPherson, just in terms of the response to what the minister said there for next steps, it does sound like there are ongoing conversations with our allies, and certainly France and the UK and others are trying to provide some sort of safe zone in and around Kabul to help further evacuations. Is that enough, or what more would you want to see from the government at this point?
You know, I'm so heartbroken because we've been working with Afghanistan allies for 20 years. I've been working in this field for so long, and I have to say that this is just this multiple level of betrayal by the Canadian government is heartbreaking. And so before I even talk about the solutions going forward, I think it's really important to recognize that we didn't have to be in this situation. This is not somewhere that Canada should be. We should have dealt with this months and months and months ago. I wrote to the minister months ago.
Other allies, to be fair, Heather, have all been scrambling at the end here too. We are not the only ones who have had trouble. Granted, our numbers are not as high as others, but
no. And our Prime Minister, just 2 weeks ago, promised Afghan Canadians that he was going to get 20,000 Afghans out, and he did not even come close. We didn't even come close to that. So of course we need to keep working with allies. Of course we need to keep working on, making sure that we are using our third countries that where when Canadians get out of Afghanistan or when our allies get out of Afghanistan, that there is a support there is a path there for them to get to Canada. We need to continue to keep pushing to make sure that there is humanitarian work being done and getting to these folks in Afghanistan. The most vulnerable, the journalists, the judges, those that we've trained. But we also have to be looking at the religious minorities. There's a lot to be done right now. And this idea that we're on the election campaign during this, I think is like Michael said, really disappointing.
I will say of that 20,000 that the Prime Minister promised to get out, the vast majority of those were Afghans who were already in third countries. So it's sort of, there are two refugee missions going on at the same time. But let me just ask both of you around the idea of leverage, humanitarian aid, because we know that is the vast majority of funding inside Afghanistan. Would you like to see, Michael Barrett, Canada using aid as leverage, i.e. saying we're not giving you more money until these conditions are met? Is that reasonable when you're trying to speak to the Taliban?
Well, look, we're dealing with, as I said, a terrorist organization that is occupying Afghanistan. And if the conversations are going to continue, they have to let anybody who wants to leave. And the aid that we're providing to folks on the ground is going to get to them one way or another. And that's the bottom line. And so as far as leverage goes, absolutely, there can be no conversations if the Taliban is not prepared to allow people who are fleeing their regime to flee.
Heather, same question to you around the aid and how we might be able to, the world writ large might be able to use that as leverage.
It's an option for sure. And I think we do need to have all options on the table. We've spent, decades trying to empower women and girls. And I've seen this Taliban over the last year exclude women and girls from the peace talks, exclude women and girls from so many of the important discussions. They weren't at the table. We were asking for them to be at that table and they weren't there. So how will that humanitarian aid be delivered? How will we ensure that it is getting to the women and girls that we have spent decades trying to empower, trying to provide the opportunities to? My worry is that if you're giving the dollars to the Taliban, they are a terrorist organization. They are not going to prioritize the empowerment of women and girls.
Yeah. Heather McPherson, thank you for making the time. Michael Barrett, you've been with me twice this morning. You've probably had enough of me now, so I'll let you go enjoy your Sunday. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.